Welcome to Strip Cover, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we're here for a poetry discussion that comes to us from the hallowed pages of William Blake. Look, we are quickly approaching 100 poetry discussions here on the channel, so if that is something that you might enjoy, consider hitting that subscribe button and partaking in a 100 video playlist of just poetry discussions. There's also a poetry review playlist here on the channel. And as always, hitting that like button really helps me out here on the channel. But we are here to talk about The Tyger by William Blake. So I'm going to start with a reading of The Tyger, and I'm going to include the reading of another poem which is probably all too often associated with the Tyger, a poem that is probably cliche to consider with the Tyger at this point. But I want to really talk about a little something in there that I think is interesting. I guess interesting. I'm not sure. The Tyger by William Blake. Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings did he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain, in what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his own work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? Probably you've already guessed that the poem that I will be reading next is The Lamb by William Blake, and it reads as such. Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Gave thee life and bid thee feed by the stream and o'er the mead? Gave thee clothing of delight, softest clothing, woolly, bright? Gave thee such a tender voice, making all the vales rejoice? Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Little lamb, I'll tell thee. Little lamb, I'll tell thee. He is called by thy name, for he calls himself a lamb. He is meek and he is mild. He became a little child. I a child and thou a lamb. We are called by his name. Little lamb, God bless thee. Little lamb, God bless thee. What a magnificent difference between a pair of poems. Why? Why are we looking at these things in this way, the Tyger and the lamb? The lamb, overtly Christian symbolism. Well, we're here in William Blake after all. So we're left to assume that everything has some type of Christian symbolism, some type of Christian overtone to it. But why these two animals? Why in this way? And I think part of it comes down to the books in which these poems present themselves. The lamb comes to us from songs of innocence, the Tyger from songs of experience. Are innocence and experience different things? Are they opposite things? Following these two books, we have the marriage of heaven and hell. So, if we're framing these things in ways which proceed in the literature, innocence and the lamb, experience and the Tyger, followed by the marriage of heaven and hell, we are left to sort of play with the idea of the fact that the song of innocence is the song of heaven, the song of experience is the song of hell. But when we're looking at the humanistic terms in here, experience versus innocence. Now, in the Tyger, experience, does it mean work? Does experience mean work? Because what we have here, and you could even, as you're reading this, sort of hear Les Mis playing in the background of your mind, because William Blake is writing during the Industrial Revolution, and he's putting all of these symbols into his poetry about the Tyger. Images of the hammer, the chain, the furnace, the anvil. This is all toiling type of work. It's all also very masculine type of work. These were things that at this time, you wouldn't have had a whole lot of women swinging an anvil. You wouldn't have had a whole lot of children, obviously, swinging an anvil. Although the definition of child back then was much different than it is today, so you would have had people that are today considered minors that were very much in these dangerous lines of work, very much in this toilsome line of work, very much in this grueling line of work. And when you go back to the Lamb, you have sort of the only type of humanistic type term, work type term, that is thrown in is clothing. Let me go back and see the words exactly here. Gave thee clothing of delight, gave thee such a softest clothing, woolly bright, gave thee clothing of delight. You have a brief mention of mead there, but that is, though it is a human drink, not a whole lot of lambs know how to make mead. What you're doing is you're actually, it's just consuming. You don't have animals in nature wearing clothes. So the work there, clothing, traditionally, what you're looking at is a more feminine type of work. Now, so this idea of women in the workplace, women at home, there was a lot of work to do at home. We're not talking about a 1950s housewife who's cooking and cleaning. The work at home was mending clothes. The work at home was the cooking and the cleaning. The work at home was taking care of all sorts of stuff that we don't necessarily equate with quote unquote work today, but they were things that very much had to happen. They were things that were very necessary for the family unit to keep functioning. Now, why do I do this? Why do I bring in traditional masculine, feminine roles here? The reason is because they are both directly tied to, both of these poems are directly tied to that type of gender role. They're also both directly tied to ideas of heaven and hell, of innocence and experience. So Christianity, the New Testament, you have Christ, you have the Lamb, and these things are sort of equated in that poem to something which is feminine. Look at the role that women play in the New Testament. This was something that if you were way back when, year zero, in the BC times, the idea of women playing that prominent a role in the Abrahamic tradition was next to nothing. So the roles of women in the Christian Bible, in the New Testament, were at that time sort of to be laughed at. If you went back and you said there were going to be women playing this larger role going forward in the Abrahamic tradition, all the Marys in the New Testament, etc., it would have been, again, laughed at. So what is it there that we're doing with the idea of the Lamb being with the New Testament, being with a feminine role, versus the Old Testament, in which we have a hard-nosed God, a God that offers very little in the way of forgiveness. And we're tying this to masculinity. It is, suffice it to say, much more traditional than we are used to seeing in today's poetry. But when we're looking at something like the Tyger, why does the Tyger appear in, I guarantee you, if you run to your bookshelf right now and you pull any collection of poetry of the English language, not American poetry, but poetry of the English language, the Tyger's going to be in it. Why? Why do we still value this poem so much? I think that part of it is because it does seem so simple. Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? Very sing-songy. It seems very easy, but it plays within itself to all of these larger themes and questions. It is questioned in here. Where are we at here? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? This is sort of, if we're looking at things in that traditional Abrahamic context as well, this is sort of a heretical question, considering that it was Eve who had caused the downfall. And here we have William Blake asking, God made the lamb. Did he also make the Tyger? The Tyger here very strongly associated with the masculine. The inference being, did God create men? Or did something else create men? Right? That's the question being posed. William Blake doesn't really answer it here. William Blake doesn't really go so far as to say, yeah, no, it's the same thing. So the idea of innocence versus experience is put into play as masculine versus feminine, is put into play as Old Testament versus New Testament. Did I put those backwards? Innocence equals feminine equals New Testament. Experience equals masculine equals Old Testament. But you also have God versus possibly the devil. What other agent of creation is there if we're going back into these Abrahamic terms? William Blake doesn't answer that question here. William Blake lets that question play on the reader's mind. William Blake simply ends this entire poem, Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? The question is hanging. There is no answer provided. The only conjecture here is God, who created the lamb, or other. And what other powers of creation might there be on that scale, but the powers of evil. And what we're having here at the end, Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night. The forest is often equated in literature with mystery and with danger. So it's easy to see that as something which is unfavorable, something which might be demonic. What immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? The question is left up. The question is not answered here. And in the greater context of the poem, what we have, the greater context of the poem being the actual context of the poem, being the song of innocence versus the song of experience, which leads into the marriage of heaven and hell. I think we are left to, I think the question is posed in an open fashion that it might be contemplated, that it might be something which is left as question, left as work in progress. That is all that I have for this poetry discussion. Again, we are quickly approaching 100 poetry discussions here on the channel. So if that is something into which you might find yourself interested, consider hitting that subscribe button. It really helps me out here on the channel if you do hit that like button. And as always, I hope to see you back for the next poetry discussion. I do short story discussions here on the channel. I do book reviews, read-alongs here on the channel, all sorts of things. So if that's something you might be into, consider hitting that subscribe button.